This is a Sony a7 III, and I have owned this camera for just about 2 years. It is an absolute beast of a camera, and it has traveled around with me a lot. It's been to Japan, it's been to Vietnam, it's been to Amsterdam, and it's been all over Ireland. But in recent months, I have had this niggling problem that has been sitting with me for a while, and I think this camera is not a good camera anymore, for me personally. Now, if you own an a7 III and you think it's the greatest camera ever, keep it. Like, I'm not telling anyone to sell their a7 III, but I want to give a perspective because it's not one I've heard online a lot, and it's also one from the hobbyist perspective, from the person who doesn't make money at photography and isn't paid to do photography. And I think there's a lot of this lacking on the internet, particularly when it comes to new photographers, people like me who just have fun with photography and aren't using it to generate their income. So why has this camera become not my ideal camera? Well, there's two major reasons for that. The first reason is actually the lenses. And I don't mean the quality of the lenses or the types of lenses that are available or whether there's pro lenses or non-pro lenses. That's perfectly fine. The problem I'm having is that there's no secondhand lenses. And when you're a hobbyist, secondhand glass is actually a very good way to go in order to get experience shooting things. So my current dream lens right now is a 70-200 2.8 GM. That thing, I've given it a shot in the camera store, and that thing is a beast. The problem is that it's €2,800, which is insane for me to spend on a lens. That's multiple months' wages. And it's just too much money. But it's the only 70-200 2.8 that's available on the market. Now, I could buy the f4 version, which is £1,000, but it's still €1,000. And the issue from the hobbyist point of view is that there's no second-hand versions of this lens. It's not like Sony's on their Mark III 70-200 and you can find the Mark I for £800 online if you look around a bit. That doesn't exist. For the Sony E-mount, there is no second-hand market, really. And any second-hand stuff you do see come up is priced pretty close to new stuff because it tends to be quite new because it's a new system, more or less. So that's the issue I'm running into. I can't buy second-hand glass cheap to get the experience to where I know, okay, actually I do want to spend €2,000 on a top-of-the-line lens, put it on my camera and have a blast with it. Because I don't actually know if a 70-200 is like what I want, or maybe I want an 80-300 super zoom, or maybe I actually want a 100-400 or a 200-600. I just don't know at this point. That's one of the main reasons for this. The lenses are very expensive. Now I have 3 lenses. I have a 24-105 f4G that I bought with the camera, which by the way is an absolute amazing travel lens, and it's a beast of a lens. I've got the 50 1.8. I bought this about 6 months ago. I had the camera for a year and a half before I bought this. I really regret not buying this like with the camera. This thing is amazing. It's the nifty 50 of Sony. And then I also have a macro 90mm 2.8 that I bought for kind of product photography, macro photography. I use this also for scanning film, and I can use it for a little bit of portraits. I also use it for like close-up B-roll and stuff in some of my videos. I also have a 18-35 Sigma 1.8 art lens on the MC11 adapter. This lens is actually really, really good. I'm going to be sad to see it go because in case you haven't figured it out, I'm going to switch off Sony. This lens is an APS-C lens, so it does work on this camera, but you get reduced resolution. But the real reason I own this is because I have an A6400, which is filming me right now, with the 10-18mm f4 lens on it. So now I need to make a choice. I want a full frame mirrorless camera with video, so I've got a choice between really the Nikon Z6 or the Canon EOS R. Now, which one to pick? This is the point in the video where my second requirement comes in, and the second reason I want to switch away from Sony is, and it's also the point where we acknowledge that film exists. And why does film still existing impact my camera buying decision? Well, for one thing, I do actually rather like shooting on film. I find it incredibly enjoyable. And the film system I went with to learn film, because it was cheap, very good and very reliable, was the Canon FD system, which is all of this here. So I've got a Canon A1, the 200-2.8, the 135-2.8, the 28-2.8, and the 300 f4L, which on a side note is an amazing lens. I've cornered myself with the film gear because the film gear is kind of its own ecosystem. And the biggest issue is that I can't really upgrade from the Canon A1 to anything else. You could buy Canon F1, but there's no auto-focusing lenses. It's just very limiting. The FD system is cheap, but it is quite limiting for future growth. My ideal camera solution would be to unify all of this into one system. So I want a full-frame mirrorless digital camera with really good video. I want a healthy second-hand market of lenses available to me. I also want to share those lenses, if possible, with film cameras and to use film lenses on my mirrorless camera natively. I want to have an upgrade path in the future so that if I do start making money off this hobby, if someone actually thinks I'm good enough to hire at some point, I have the ability to purchase more modern lenses for a digital camera as well. There is only one system that has all of this, and it is, of course, the Nikon system. So the Nikon system has all of the advantages I want. First off, upgrade path. I can buy new Z-mount lenses, and from what I've downloaded of sample files and had a look at, those Z-mount lenses look really nice. They're expensive, but they're there for when somebody actually thinks I'm worth paying, which is probably going to happen in 2000 and never. So there's that. But I have the future upgrade path. As for a second-hand market, with the FTZ adapter, you can use F-mount lenses, and there just seems to be floods of F-mount lenses in all the shops. Any place that takes in camera gear or does trading, there just seems to be mountains of F-mount lenses everywhere. So I could pick up a Nikon 50 1.8G for cheap, stick it on the lens. I can pick up the 85, you know. If I want a 70 to 200 equivalent, I can use an 80 to 200 2.8, an AFS lens, and use that. There is some weird limitations with the FTZ adapter with like direct drive lenses or screwdriver lenses, but yeah, it works. It lets me use F-mount glass on the Nikon and tap into that huge F-mount second-hand glass market. And then it comes to film cameras. Nikon's film cameras are really nice and are F-mount. So that means I will be able to mount any of the G lenses. I'm planning to pick up a Nikon F100. But you can mount a Nikon G lens on that as well. So the 50 1.8G will just pop on the F100 and I can shoot film with that lens. So it really lends itself to being kind of one ecosystem. Now, there are some quirks, like you can't use some of like the E-mount super modern F-mount lenses on the F100, but any lenses for the F100 are automatically compatible with the Z6. So it all kind of balances out in the end. And that's the general plan. The other reason I didn't go with Canon, and this is the deal breaker for me, was that while Canon does it the EOS R, their video capabilities seem to be iffy at best, although I probably wouldn't even notice, you know, I'm using what, 0.5% of the camera's capabilities, to be quite honest, at my level. So we'll ditch the video issues, you know, with the crops and stuff like that. Let's just assume the Canon shoots better video. It's still a deal breaker for me because you cannot get manual lenses for the Canon system that work natively on the EOS R. And what I mean is the FD lenses, the predecessor to the EF mount, do not and cannot be adapted to the EF mount. Now they can be adapted to the EOS R with adapters, but I can't use those for film cameras because the old Canon film cameras don't really unify very well. It's just this weird situation where if you want to use older EF lenses, you have to have autofocus and aperture control and stuff. While the Nikon will allow me to use the F-mount lenses on like mechanical winding film cameras, like the F3 and the F4. It's not really a very good argument, but it seems to me that for me personally, as a hobbyist, as someone who shoots film and digital, and wants access to lots of lenses, cheap lenses, good lenses, with the path in the future, it seems to be that the Nikon Z6 is the way to go. So now the question is how to get there. Well, it's going to be a lot of selling. I have to sell off all my Canon FD gear. I have to sell off my A6400 and that because I want 2 bodies, so I'm going to have to buy 2 Z6 bodies. I'm going to sell off all my Sony gear and then just purchase all the Z gear. But I am traveling to Japan in 6 weeks' time. I'll pick up an f100 and some lenses there, and that'll probably be the kickstart. And then it's time to start selling everything. It's going to be a rough transition, but I think it'll be worth it personally. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video, and I'll see you next time.